The Senate Committee on Natural Resources will now come to order. Will the Secretary please call roll?
Senator Flores, Senator Goycochea, Senator Hansen, Chair Pazina, Senator Scheibel.
And we can mark Senator Hansen as present, and please mark Senator Flores present when he comes. We do have 4 members, and we do have a quorum. As I think everyone knows, we have a joint session, so we're going to try to get everyone on their way from this committee before the joint session begins. So with that, we'll provide some housekeeping reminders. Please do silence your cell phones and electronic devices. The public is advised that during meetings, legislators and staff are using laptops to view bills and exhibits and not for personal reasons. We are trying to be as paper-free as possible. Please don't look at this as a sign of inattention or disrespect. Please note that we require everyone to submit exhibits in an electronic format the day before the meeting. A few reminders about testifying before the committee. Please sign in at the table by the door. Give the committee secretary your business card if you have one prior to testifying. And even if you're not testifying, you may want to sign in so that there's a record of who may be interested in a particular bill in case the committee would like to contact you at a later date. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state and spell your name and share your affiliation, if any, for the record. Then turn the microphone off each time you have completed speaking. If you have any handouts for the committee, you're asked to provide 10 hard copies to the committee secretary for use by the public. We will be taking public comment at the end of each committee meeting, of each meeting, and we'll be limiting public comment to 2 minutes per person to ensure that everyone gets an opportunity to speak. Please feel free to provide any additional comments in writing to the committee secretary so that they may be added to the record. Today we're going to be hearing 2 bills. This is DeLong Day and Natural Resources, AB 91 and AB 191. Revising provisions governing water and revising provisions relating to water conservation. We're going to begin today with Assembly Bill 91 and would like to welcome the Assemblyman up to the table / hot seat. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee, for letting me come and present these bills. I hope not to take too long a time on this. Well, dad jokes. So we're discussing AB 91. It is a relatively straightforward bill. It provides for water right holders that have wells on public land the ability to drill a replacement well should that well fail without revising their water right. That provision is trying to mirror what already exists in state statutes for owners of wells on private land. During the committee meeting that this bill was heard in the Assembly, there were some issues with some of the members of the committee with regards to the fact that it is on federal land and making sure that the federal land management agency knew about it. And so an amendment was added to the bill which says you need to notify the federal land manager if you are drilling that replacement well. And I can walk through the specific sections. It's a very short bill. Section 1 inserts public lands into subsection A. Subsection 2 also inserts public lands. And then a new subsection 4 and 5 were added. Subsection 4 addresses the notification provision for the federal land managers, and subsection 5 defines public lands, which was a request of the U.S. Forest Service and their comments that were provided to the Assembly. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman. Do we have any questions? Senator Scheibel.
Thank you, Assemblymember. I'm not sure if this is for you or maybe our policy analyst, but didn't we hear a very similar bill last session?
What about 200 feet?
Yeah.
I was not in this committee last session, but I do believe there is a bill regarding private lands being able to move a well within a certain distance. Is that perhaps?
So the reason that I'm asking, and maybe my colleagues can help me out here, is that I recall we had this discussion about basically re-drilling a well that has failed within, 200 feet or 1,000 feet.
Right.
And then we had discussed how if that 200 feet would exceed the property line, there were concerns about drilling a well on public lands. And so, am I understanding correctly that the point of this bill is to write the statute such that it's clear that anybody is allowed to drill on a public land despite those concerns?
Thank you for the question, Chair, to you and through you.
You may go direct, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Senator. This bill does touch on that indirectly. The intent of the bill, though, was if you have a well on public land, it'd be allowing a replacement well within 300 feet, which is the same distance that's currently provided on private land.
Okay, Senator Gokachia.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and to my colleague. The bill last session, what it was, you had to own both properties, but you could cross the section line. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We can always rely on you, thank you.
Okay.
A follow-up question from Senator Scheibel.
I'm sorry. Now, I do have a follow-up. So, would this bill allow, if I have my plot of land and I have my well on the very edge of it and that well fails and the edge of my land shares a border with public land, would this allow me to re-drill my well across that border on the public land adjacent to my privately owned land?
From the state's, sorry, good question, Senator. This bill is dealing with state water rights, and so from that perspective, yes. If you're going to do anything on public land, whether it be administered by the BLM or the Forest Service, you're going to need to have some sort of authorization. You can't just go on public land and do it. And that's part of the reason we put in the provision under subsection 4 that you have to notify the Federal Land Management Agency.
And that was Assemblyman DeLong for the record.
My apologies.
All right, any more questions from the committee? Senator Hansen.
Just a real quick follow-up. So essentially, somebody already has a water right. It's been approved. They have a well that's gone bad apparently, or for whatever reason, they need to re-drill the well. They still have to jump through section 4, all the hoops, basically, try administering such public lands to comply with all applicable federal law. So we're really not changing anything. I don't understand, what's the need? You can't do that right now under state law? If I got a well that's gone bad, and I'm using it for stock water or whatever, I currently right now can't go and re-drill that without, and if I did, don't I have to still comply with all federal and state law? And I'm trying to, what problem are we trying to solve here?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Assemblyman DeLong for the record. What we're trying to solve with this bill is being able to drill a replacement well without having to go through re-permitting it with the state engineer.
Okay, the state level is where okay.
Yes.
Well, I saw Adam here, so I assume he'll come up. Excuse me, the state water engineer Sullivan, we'll talk to him at some point as well. So that's the problem we're trying to take care of. Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, committee, any more questions? All right, thank you so much. You can take a step back from the table and we will open it up for support for Assembly Bill 91. Those testifying in support, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and committee members. For the record, my name's Steve Walker. I represent Eureka County. Eureka County is in support of the amended version of AB 91. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Doug Busselman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Nevada Farm Bureau. Water developments provide significant contributions to effective livestock grazing on federally managed lands. Through the distribution of livestock across grazing permits by way of privately owned and maintained water resources, range conditions are improved, and it's a benefit for everyone's interest. We support AB 91 as part of this principle. When a livestock water well is in need of replacement, the ability to re-drill a replacement well within the guidelines outlined in AB 91 should be allowed. We appreciate Assemblyman DeLong bringing this bill forward and strongly encourage your passage.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. I'm Davey Sticks, member of the Nevada Cattlemen's Association. We supported this bill from Assemblyman DeLong wholeheartedly when it first came through. This affects us. This is real life. When we saw it, we thought it was written for us, and it wasn't. But this affects the cattle industry every day in Nevada when you're on public grazing. Failures happen, and we need to go out and we need to get water to our cattle right away. The only thing we were concerned with the amendment was that it's a notification only, not a requirement or a condition that has to be met. And the main thing is we have to, even if that wasn't written into this bill, that amendment, we'd still have to get approval from the BLM or the Forest Service to do this. So just wanted to make that clear on the record. So thank you. We ask this committee to please put your yes vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have anyone else here in Carson City who'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 91? Seeing no one racing to the front. BPS, do we have anyone on the phones?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much. All right. We will close testimony on support for AB 91 and open testimony for opposition. Anyone in opposition of AB 91, please come forward. Or forever hold your testimony. All right, BPS, anyone on the phones?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
All right, you know what that means. We're going to close our testimony on opposition and move it into neutral. Anyone who'd like to testify in neutral? State Engineer, we're looking at you.
Adam Sullivan, State Engineer. I'd like to testify neutral on this bill. To answer your question, Senator Hansen, my interpretation is that replacement wells are, the allowance for replacement wells is not specific to, or the intent is not to be specific to private or public lands. I mean, there's a need if a well collapses and there's a need to replace that, then that's why that provision is there. It's essentially looked at as the same source for the same use. It's just, if the well fails, it needs to be replaced. So I don't see this bill as creating any new problems. I understand the intent is to be clear that it's meant to apply to both public and private and treat all water right holders equally. So to that end, I'm neutral on this bill.
All right, thank you so much. Did we have any questions for the State Engineer? I had a feeling one might be coming. Sit tight. Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. I'm a broken record on some of this. I apologize. Okay, so right now I have appropriated water. I'm on federal land, and they're using stock water, but I'm sure there are other examples. The well goes bad for whatever reason. Currently, what's the process that somebody in this case with the state, the current process, what's going to change if this law passes? I mean, what are you going to have to do that's different than what you're doing right now?
Adam Sullivan, for the record. Well, the well driller would file a notice of intent, and we would try to turn that around as quickly as we could within a couple of days. We would look at the ownership, and the well driller has certain responsibilities to follow, to be consistent with regulation and so on. So that's how we would process it. I think, as previously mentioned, the bill from last session or 2 sessions ago now allows that 300-foot radius to cross a section line, and so that would that helps, I think, facilitate the process. This would add certainty that if it's on public lands, that this would also be, that replacement well would be allowable.
Okay, but it's still something you already do. A well driller obviously isn't just going to go out and drill another hole in the ground without going through the permitting process and make sure, that the waters were in fact appropriated that are going to be used. I'm just kind of trying to figure out what really changes here. It doesn't sound like a whole lot, other than it guarantees that if you're on public land and you need that water, and it is your water that's been properly appropriated, and something goes bad, that this maybe helps expedite the process maybe a little bit, or I can see where this could be a real crisis. You have a spot where livestock are, you need water right away. Your well goes bad, and you have so X number of head of livestock counting on that stock water. Would this in any way help expedite that process to make sure that the guy doesn't lose his livestock from dying of thirst or having to transfer them to a different place?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, I don't see that as a likely situation, but I think that the intent here is to make sure that doesn't become a problem.
Okay,
And
well,
I
I'm just
can-
trying to figure out what we're trying to solve here and make sure that, in some cases we make things worse, but basically, if this is on public land versus private land, this will help expedite it and make sure that the state engineer's office has the green light to go ahead and, allow somebody to bore a new well without going through some additional, bureaucratic red tape or something that apparently could exist currently.
Adam Sullivan, for the record, from a water rights standpoint, yes, that's how I see it.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. All right. Seeing no further questions, we always thank you for your testimony. All right. Anyone else in neutral here in Carson City? BPS, anyone on the phones?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Wonderful. Assemblyman, would you like to come up and make any final statements? Great. All right. You're helping us get out of here a little quicker. All right. So with that, we'll close the testimony on AB 91, and we will open the hearing on AB 191, revising provisions relating to water conservation, and welcome the Assemblyman back to the table. Please get started when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assemblyman DeLong, for the record. Again, just to kind of repeat myself, I appreciate the committee letting me present on this bill. Currently, suppliers of water have to, regardless of how many service connections they have to prepare a water conservation plan to basically manage their water losses. And there are about 600 to 700 of these water suppliers, so suppliers of water in the state. Approximately 350 of them have less than 15 connections, which means the systems are so small, they can just look around their property and see all the connections. It's not like a city or Truckee Meadows Water Authority that has thousands of connections. So the intent of this bill is to simplify for these small water suppliers their regulatory burden, to limit that, and that is to make sure that they don't have to meet the requirement for a water conservation plan, because their systems are so small. They know if they're losing water because they just look around their property. It's pretty much that simple. And that's how that was the intent of the bill. And the way it came out of committee had three provisions that define what's covered for this exemption. And that is they have less than 15 service connections, service year-round residents, and or a supplier of municipal or quasi-municipal purposes. Unfortunately, and I didn't catch this in the LCB suggested edits, is that having that degree of specificity actually reduces the number that would be covered by this bill to 10, which doesn't seem very reasonable. So I've provided a friendly amendment, which I think everyone has, and the intent is to strike the year-round residences and the subsection 3, the supplier for municipal and quasi-municipal. That will then have this bill address all 350 suppliers of water and make them exempt from that regulatory reporting requirement. I can go into a little more detail, Chair, if you'd like to, about who's covered, or I can just take questions.
I think we can probably go ahead and take questions. All right, committee? Okay, I'll get us started. This is such a short bill, so section 1, when you're mentioning less than 15 service connections, would these suppliers maybe be servicing an organization that might be a bit larger in nature? So while they have less than 15 service connections, one of the ones that this entity is providing for could have upwards of 100 to 200 people who work in an organization, and that's one of the connections they're supplying for. I'm just curious.
That's a very good question, Assemblyman DeLong, for the record. There could be quite a few individuals being served. One example is the Dyer Elementary School. They would be covered by this. Very small school. They have, I think, 1 or 2 service connections, but they're something close to 100 or so kids there. The exemption that we're trying to address here is a water conservation provision to look at water loss and how you minimize the loss or waste of water.
All right, Senator Hansen?
Thanks. Okay. Well, I'm glad you brought up Dyer. That was part of my district till last mapping. But anyway, so that I was trying to just figure out where we're going with that. I mean, how many small, so you're literally talking about little tiny Dyer, Fish Lake Valley. The school has its own entity basically it supplies its own water because it's on a well, and it's 2 connections, the school and administrative building or something like that. Yeah. And because of state law currently, even though they're so tiny that they can literally see any leaks that may be on the system, under state law they have to provide a big formal plan like one of the big major water purveyors in northern Nevada or Clark County on Southern Nevada Water. So they essentially have the same current requirements that a giant utility who has the staff and everything else to deal with this stuff. That's what we're targeting with this. So when you mentioned 350, 350 different water purveyors. Had no clue. But you're talking about little tiny ones that are actually on a well in very low isolated places and that don't need to basically have a big conservation plan because their total water demand in a year is about 1 block in Las Vegas kind of a thing or something. Is that what we're shooting for here?
Thank you, Senator. Assemblyman DeLong, for the record, I couldn't have said it better. You're exactly correct.
Good answer. I like that. Thanks.
The senator was especially happy you put that on the record. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, we'll have you go ahead and step back, and we will open up for testimony in support of AB 191. Please come forward. Anyone in support? BPS, anyone on the phones?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
All right, we'll close testimony on support and open testimony in opposition. Anyone here in opposition today to 191, please come forward. And BPS, by any chance, is there anyone on the phones in opposition of Assembly Bill 191?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
All right. Anyone in neutral on Assembly Bill 191? Look at that.
Adam Sullivan for the record. I'd like to testify neutral on this bill, and I'm in agreement with the comments that have been previously made. The way it's structured here, it would target really small entities that, from our perspective, for the division, the water conservation plans, when you look through the way the statute's written, it's really geared towards community water systems, with the, coming up with ways to look at rate structures or the importance of conserving water for the different people served by that small system. And when we're talking about examples like a school, or there's a number of other examples like a gas station and a mini mart, or a little hotel, or campgrounds, seasonal campgrounds. The way that the water conservation plan framework is structured is not aimed at those entities. So what this bill does is I think more effectively make the definition of a supplier of water consistent with who's intended to be targeted by water conservation plans.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? You just want to be told you're right again, don't you? All right, hold on. Senator Hansen.
I love that. Adam, am I right again? Thank you. No, actually, why are you in neutral? It sounds like your testimony, I mean, what is wrong with the bill, basically, is kind of what I'm wondering. Sounds like your testimony sounds like a good idea to me.
Adam Sullivan, for the record, I'm neutral because we will do what the legislature wants us to do.
Well, we like your advice too, I mean, we're not water experts up here, so we're trying to learn, with the exception of Senator Gokichia. We're not water experts, so anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much. It wouldn't be a committee if we didn't hear you testify neutral. So thank you very much for coming up. BPS, do we have anyone on the phones?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll close down testimony on neutral and see if we have any final comments from the Assemblyman.
Yes, Assemblyman DeLong, for the record. I just want to say thank you very much for hearing both these bills. Would appreciate a pass on 91 and a do pass as amended on 191. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 191. And I would like to point out how expeditious our committee is today, knowing that we don't want to keep everyone here after the joint hearing. So with that, we are going to move into our final order of business, which is public comment. As a reminder, public comment is limited to 2 minutes per person. However, please feel free to submit any additional written comments to the secretary, and they will be added to the record. Is there any public comment here in Carson City? BPS, did anyone magically join us on the phones?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you, sir. Go ahead and give us your name and start when you're ready.
Hi, my name is George Taylor. I'm from Reno. I have a PhD in computer engineering from Berkeley, and I've studied the electricity options around the country quite extensively for the past 8 or 10 years as part of a think tank. I said a few things yesterday, and I realized I just forgot what might be in other people's heads, and I wanted to add one important thing, and that is, as far as I can tell, nothing that we would ever do in the future with the small modular reactors or anything else would ever need to use Yucca Mountain. I had just basically blanked that out of my mind, thinking it's so ridiculous that it will never come back. And the reason is that we don't need to bury any used fuel from any kind of nuclear reactor. We can just keep it in dry casks on the surface forever, as long as we wish to, because it can't do anywhere. It's just a bunch of metal rods and a big concrete thing. And it's not even very warm and not very radioactive. I've hugged one myself at Diablo Canyon while taking a tour. So I just forgot yesterday that that's an old, frightening and terrible political issue in this state. And you know what? I lived in California too long. I forgot about it. So now I'm over here, and fortunately that will never come up, and we can really focus on everything else, and which is what I hope we'll do. That's it.
Thank you so much. BPS, by any chance, did someone join us on the phones?
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Well, look at that. Seeing no more public comment, this edition of Natural Resources is closed, and we'll see everyone back here on Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Thank you very much.